Okay, you guys. Hey, it's 6.2. We're going to continue on our journey to understand what goes on in our environment, how it relates to society, and we're going to talk about economics. And economics is a key part of what we do. And if you can't understand the economy of it, then what happens is we'll never ever be able to sustain what we need to take care of. And so, um, you know, uh, it's crazy. We think about the economy and the environment, and we always think that there's conflict there, and there doesn't have to be. The reality is there's ways to work with the environment and in a way that is able to sustain it, but also to provide goods and services for what we do. I mean, that's if you think about it. I mean, that's what happened for thousands of years before we get into the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, and things changed. But at the same time, you see some economies going back to an environmental uh, based economy, and it works. And so we'll talk about that today. But to understand everything, economy or economics is goods and services, and the things that we need, and we all need things. And if we are unable to produce those things, or are not able to grow those things, and if we think about it, everything we have is either grown or it's mined, right? I mean, the shirt on your back, your shoes, it's either grown or mined. And so if we can't produce those things ourselves, which there's certain things that I can make and certain things that you can make, then we're going to have to come up with them somewhere if we intend on having them. And I would contend that we have the ability to create and develop anything in a way that is sustainable. It's just the desire and what we want to put into making it happen. So economics, it's studying how goods and services are met, and think about the demand for goods and services, right? So that's what's driving it. If you think about where both words come from, okios is a Greek word, and it's actually the basis for both the word ecology and economics. And okios stands for family property, and home. And that's what the Greeks based it on when they came up with that word. And it was a basic central part of what Greek society was back in the day. And it's kind of interesting how the word ecology and economics both have the same beginning, right? And so if we think about what goods are anything we produce. And it's things that we produce that are bought or purchased or traded or bartered for, right? A service is something that's done in the form of work. And so if we think about the service sector, restaurants, those types of situations where a service is performed, lawn care, I'm just coming up with a couple, but chiropractic service, right? So goods, anything that we're producing, and then services is, work. In the beginning, basically, we were a subsistence economy. Basically, we got our direct needs from nature. We did not take anything else other than what we needed, and we didn't need a lot. And if you think about early society, basically everything was utilized. In fact, so much that it's sometimes very difficult to find any trace or examples of those societies, right? So we have to look for it. And we think about us, right? So we have the number 2 largest landfill in the nation. It's easy to find the remnants of what our society is as far as what we've purchased because it goes in the garbage. And here's an interesting one. When people are looking for ancient societies, whether they're archaeologists or historians or whatever, when they're looking for them, and what their culture was like, a lot of times what they do is they look for the toilet. They look for ancient outhouses, and then they excavate them, because what happened was people threw stuff in the toilet to get rid of it, and you wouldn't see it again. And so they excavate these outhouses, and they have to go through literally excrement to get to it. So I think it's pretty funny. But that's the greatest place to start looking. Capitalistic economy, we're looking at, basically we're determining the market sets, the market is set by supply and demand, and the people who want something. So buyers and sellers talk back and forth, and they set the prices of what it is that they're going to do. Centrally planned, the government takes a big role in this, and basically the government says, this is what this is worth, and this is what you're going to get for it. Then you have what's called a mixed economy. And a mixed economy is basically the government will get involved, and they'll say what some things are worth, and then sometimes they don't. They stay out of it. If we look at what happens when the government intervenes, basically they're trying to prevent any unfair practices. They're providing social services. They're making sure that there's a safety net there so the market doesn't explode, right? So the bottom doesn't drop out of it for the producers or the people who are in the service industry, and people don't get taken advantage of it. And so basically what they're doing is they're managing the system. They're trying to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And in part to that, by doing that, they can also then control or prevent a little bit pollution. So if we look at the conventional view, economics, right? So we have goods and services, and then if you produce those goods and services, you get paid for them. And so it's this circle that just keeps going around and around. It's a wheel, and industry produces the materials, the households buy the materials, you have labor and wages who are dependent upon that, and so the households have to have labor and wages. They need to get paid, and so in the response, once they get paid, they buy more. It's this never-ending wheel, and that doesn't look at the environment at all. In fact, it's out on the edge, right? So the environment is pretty much getting taken advantage of as an external factor. If we look at the environmental view of economics, right? So we're looking at how to work hand in hand with the environment, and also our economy. And what happens is that we look at our goods and services are being produced by our ecosystems. Earlier, I said that if we have it, we either grow it or we mine it. And so if we approach our mindset from that angle, then if you don't have the environment, you don't have any goods and services, you don't have anything. And so we are not this infinite item, right? So if you think about it this way, we're on a spaceship Earth, and we're whizzing around through the galaxy at about 17,000, 18,000 miles per hour. And everything that we have on this earth, for the most part, is all that we have. Now, people are starting to look at the mine and other places as being, I'm sorry, not the mine, the moon, as being places to mine for other items, especially if we go to a jump off of going to Mars. But the reality is what's here is what we have. And if it's not in a renewable situation, then eventually it'll get all used up, right? There's a finite amount. So if you have X and you use half of X, that's where you're at half. And you use all of X, it's gone. And so without natural resources, we wouldn't have the things that we have. And I think that an environmental view of economics needs to be considered at all times. And I think we're getting there. I think it's getting better. If you look at ecosystem services, what's out there, right? So of our crops, what's pollinating them? Well, pollinators. And so you see this big push like what we're doing with the pollinator plot, that people are recognizing that we have a problem. Nutrient cycling. If you think about nutrient cycling, we compost everything at our house. Well, why are we doing that? Well, that's nutrients that can go back in the soil that I can use when I plant my garden again, right? If we think about climate is huge right now. Why? Because we have a problem, right? So if you're not paying attention, we're having more and more storms, more and more issues going on. And so big picture here. If you heat up water, it evaporates. The more water that evaporates, it goes into the air. The more energy, water is energy, right? So water is energy. You have this energy in the air, and then you're seeing more and more violent storms. But also you're seeing areas that are not receiving rainfall because now that rainfall is going somewhere else. And so we see areas of drought and we see areas of flooding, and our environment regulates that, right? So trees prevent all sorts of destruction with their root beds and plants, right? And so incredible. How about this one? Duckweed, limna minor. I don't have a picture of it right now, but it's that little weed that you see on top of the pond. It's real tiny. I'm sure I have some in my classroom somewhere, but it removes heavy metals from water. Cattails do the same. And so if you put them next to a wastewater treatment plant where the water is coming out or in the process, now these cattails and these millions and millions of duckweeds are removing waste. Unbelievable, right? If you look at my septic field out back my house, right? All of our wastewater goes out the back of the house, and our grass is what is taking care of it. It's soaking up the nutrients. So, you know, what I guess where I'm getting at here is our environment is the essence of what we do. And if we don't take care of our resources, in other words, use them up or cause major destruction, things are going to be good. But if we use them all up, they'll be gone. If we tear up our world, it will be hard to do what we do. Harder, anyway. So if we look at classical economics, basically free market economy, we're looking at society as a whole and what is going on with buying and selling, and you've got these different levels, rich versus poor, and the ability to get ahead in society. It's just basically it does whatever it wants, and buyers and sellers are setting this up, and it's the haves and the have-nots basically. And so if we look at some of the neoclassical economics, well, now we're pulling in psychological factors why people do what they do in consumer choices, and we see a lot of this taking place in marketing, right? So people are marketing to determine who they're selling to, why, what their consumer preferences are, and what does it do? Well, ultimately, you're able to reach what we call the supply and demand, right? So wherever the supply and the demand meet, for example, on this graph, that's what's setting the price. And so if you reduce the quantity, the price goes up. And if you increase the quantity, the price goes down. And so it's really set by, again, that market. Cost benefit analysis, right? So that's what we need to do, and what people do on basically everything. And what are the benefits? What are the costs? And we weigh them out, and see what makes more sense. And a lot of times we don't know all of the costs, or the benefits for that matter. And so if we look at this graph here, the cost of resource use or pollution reduction versus the benefits, for me, I'm sitting there going, okay, is it going to be, what's the cost going to be to save these different things or protect these different things? What happens with neoclassical economics? It's easy. We have wealth, we have jobs. But the problem is because the idea set is that all growth is good, that a lot of times we forget the environment, and we're taking advantage of what the long-term effects could be. And so it's forgetting the fact that we might be robbing Peter to pay Paul. So the problem again with this model is that all resources are infinite, and then if they are not, we'll find a replacement. And so that's not good. That's not good thinking. And so if you think about what we have, again, we either grow it, we mine it, right? So they're either limited or they're non-limited, right? So, for example, water. Water is a renewable resource. If we take all the water in the world, 97% of it is salt. And so we have 3% left for us. And if we take half of that's locked up in the glaciers or the ice caps, which are currently melting, which means they're going into the salt water. So we have 1.5% left for us. So if we have 1.5% left for us, doesn't seem like an awful lot of water. Well, it's still about a trillion and a half gallons per person. But we have this thing called the water cycle. The water goes up, the water goes down. We've been drinking the same water on our planet for millions and millions and millions of years. The difference is it keeps recycling. It keeps cycling through condensation, precipitation, evaporation, groundwater, movement, sublimation, going from ice to a gas, right? And so if we think about that, it's renewable, but can you make it non-renewable? Well, sure you can. Yeah. You can cause a source of water to be polluted to where you can't use it. Will it evaporate out? Sure. Will everything be left behind? Yeah. Right. So forest the same way. If you think about the Easter Islanders, same thing, right? Same thing. They cut all the trees down. There weren't any left. Well, they didn't pay attention to that, and so their economy destroyed. basically, we're dealing with costs associated with us doing business, essentially. And we look at different costs and benefits associated with that. And there's external costs, right? So what are the health problems as a result of us producing gasoline and petroleum in these communities that have housing next to the refineries? Well, one, we don't take into effect the health risks associated with that, and people are experiencing that, right? So I said it earlier. There's no social justice with environmental, or no environmental justice without social justice, right? And so there's a lot of different problems out there that are going on, and it's very difficult at times for you to account for that. So if we look at the long-term effects, and all growth is good, or growth is good, the problem is that we are putting more emphasis on our current economy and our current world than thinking about the long-term benefits. And so essentially discounting means that short-term benefits are more important than long-term. And so a lot of times policymakers and people don't even think about this, right? And so we're not programmed that way. We don't think about the fact that we launch all these satellites into orbit and what happens when they're done. We don't have this responsibility of birth to grave. What do we do? Right? And so as a result of that, we have a bunch of space junk flying around our Earth and crashing into itself. And so now all of a sudden you go, uh-oh, what happens if we launch another satellite, or maybe the International Space Station is in the way? Well, people are starting to have to think about that. And now we're starting to think about externalizing and putting those costs in there. Pretty interesting. If we look at what's going on, economic growth does help maintain people's jobs, society, order, etc. But we also need to find measures that we can create economic growth and prevent environmental destruction, right? Makes sense. So if you look at this diagram here, basically bigger is better and more is better. And it's this circular event again, right? So as we get more resources and opportunity, more people can survive, and more material can be produced. And this is this constant circular consumptive event, right? So we are constantly feeding the machine, and that's what it is. Affluenza, it's kind of interesting. Just recently in the news, there was a individual who got in trouble, and his defense was affluenza, right? He was an affluent individual. He needed to have goods and services, and so that made him, I can't remember if there was a robbery or a DUI or whatever it was, and it kept going, and he ended up getting in a lot of trouble. But if you think about this, just because we have something, that doesn't make us happy, right? And affluenza is a real thing, and we have to find ways to make certain that we are not focused on things. And I think once that happens, good things will start happening. Now, here's the deal. You cannot control economic growth. It cannot be constantly going up and 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 up. There are limits. And so if we don't find efficient ways of doing business, and things that do not constantly destroy our resources, then it crashes again, like Easter Island, right? So, ecological economists are very, very important in a sense. They are saying that ecosystems and the economy can go hand in hand, need to go hand in hand, and we cannot get past environmental limitations, right? And so we need to think about our ecological systems and how we protect those in relation to our growth, because those two can go hand in hand if we have the correct mindset about it. And so environmental economists basically are looking at sustainable economies, using efficiency and protecting our resources, right? So we are becoming efficient. So it all comes down to this. We have to rethink the way we do business, right? We have to think about how we do business and protect our goods and services. And I point out here that it doesn't always mean a lower quality of life. In fact, it actually can be a greater quality of life. I put in our Google Classroom two videos on gross domestic product. And gross domestic product is the value of goods and services produced in a country. And what I think is powerful here is they're looking now at different indexes. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go watch those. And then when you're done, I'll pause here. And when you're done, come back and we'll get started again. Okay, here we go. Hey, I hope that was good. I was really very much impressed with what Robert Kennedy had to say. Hope you liked them. If we think about gross domestic product in our society, there are other ways to kind of indicate where we are globally, right? So the genuine progress indicator basically is, do we have desirable and undesirable economic activity? I think the happiness index that one of the videos was talking about, that you look at, that there are really these different indicators don't take into effect the overall health and feelings and environmental issues always. And so as a result of that, I think there are different ways of looking at this to show how a society is doing, right? So how well a society is doing. Now, GDP, again, is the traditional way of saying, this is what we produce, this is what we sell, and this is what we're worth, right? What's the economy worth? But I think there's so much more, right? And so what contributions are being made by people? What contributions are being made by the environment? What crime is going on, right? So genuine progress indicator is another system that we look at. But the global health happiness index is another one. Net economic welfare is another way of looking at it, and basically it's adding the environment to it. And what it does is it takes the GDP and it says, okay, how much time do we have to really enjoy ourselves, and how much environmental degradation, how much use of the environment is taking place. Sustainable economic welfare, what we're looking at is resource depletion, economic distribution of wealth, and income. And so it's really giving us more of a clearer picture of what is going on in this country, right? Here's what it comes down to for me. In order for us to make and assess everything that's going on in a country or in a community, we need to value ecosystems and ecosystem services and realize that these things have value, whether it's a species or us being able to use it. My family went to the Grand Canyon last year and were able to walk around. We went to Humiston Woods and were able to walk around. Both of those things have value to our family. If we think about scientific value, right? What discoveries? If you look at the pharmaceuticals, right? 99% of pharmaceuticals are plant-based materials that came from our world. Well, if they're gone, how do you do anything with it? How do you get new? If it's gone, how do you make new? Educational value, it's what we do, right? So very cool. What about the aesthetics? I just love looking at it. I love going out there and kayaking or go hiking or, you know. But then what about our cultural views, right? If you think about us as a society, some of us are more culturally connected to our world than others. You look at the indigenous people of Australia and their connection to Uluru. Uluru was formerly named Ayers Rock. Uluru is their sacred rock, their sacred temple, and how they believe that we really only we're only renters. We don't get to own things. And so there's a lot of value in that, a lot of value. So if we look at assigning value to whatever we are looking at in an ecosystem, we can do what's called a contingent valuation. Basically, we figure out what you're willing to pay for it and what you're willing to pay to protect it or what you're willing to pay to restore it. And those are not always easy to figure out, right? So it doesn't always happen that way. And but we can figure out what people want by their behavior. And so what are they willing to spend time doing, and what are they willing to prevent from happening, and measuring it that way. And so if we look at the value of ecosystem services throughout the globe, you can come up with a number, and I don't think this number is as accurate as it was, but somewhere around 42, I think it's actually higher now. I think it's like $50 trillion, right? And so we can put a number on it. What happens when the market breaks? So market failure. If we look at market failure, it does not look or take into effect things that are going on in the environment. And so what ends up happening is there are other external costs associated with that. Now, green taxes are pretty interesting. So if you do something that is harmful to the environment, there is what's called a green tax. And so you can promote conservation by penalizing people for doing the wrong thing, basically. And there are incentives for you to do the right thing. And so it's pretty interesting how those are being applied by different groups, such as the EPA and other things like that. Eco-labeling. Eco-labeling is cool. Basically, it is a way of identifying what brands are being sustainable. And the problem I have with this is what we're assuming is that they all tell the truth. And they've all identified that and said, hey, we're serious, right? Is your tuna dolphin safe? How do they collect the tuna, or how do they harvest the tuna? And does it take into effect that they're preventing turtles from being swept up? Where do you get your shrimp? And are they using drag nets that destroy the bottom of the ocean, or how are they catching them? So eco-labeling is a very powerful thing, but as I was referring to earlier, there's a lot of times where people don't necessarily tell you the truth of what something is green or whether it's not. And so as a result of that, it's called greenwashing. And it basically says that these companies they're telling you that they're really good for the environment, or they don't hurt the environment, when actually they're not, or they really do damage, So what's my conclusion here? We look at economic development and growth, and we need to bring into the picture environmental ethics, right and wrong. What's good for our world? Is it sustainable? And so I contend that we cannot have an economy that's sustaining if we don't take our environment into consideration, and we don't have environmental quality. And so with that, I just got to say thank you guys so much for being amazing Ninja Eco Warriors. I'm thankful for all you do, and I hope you have a good day. I appreciate you.